There was no big draft night trade, but the Pelicans did something really cool by drafting Jaron Pierre with the 58th overall pick. And I'm here to remind you, the offseason is just getting started. It's the Thursday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Pelicans. I'm your host, Jake Madison, and we have a new addition to the New Orleans Pelicans. With the 58th overall pick, the Pelicans select Jaron Pierre Jr. out of SMU. Good size. He's a good volume shooter. He's 6'5", can shoot the three ball really well. A rare kind of 5-year college player. Started at Southern Miss, then went to Wichita State, then Jacksonville State, then SMU, where last year he averaged 17.6 points per game, almost 5 rebounds per, and shot the three at 37%. Those are pretty good numbers to me here. He also had 2 assists per game. Look, for a guy late in the second round that gives you cheap shooting at the very least, that's great. That's not what makes this a fun pick. I just listed the colleges that he's played at. Y'all might know this name because he played at St. Augustine, St. Aug, here in New Orleans. They drafted the local guy, bringing him back. This is an awesome move, I think, just for that. We'll get into kind of his scouting report here in a second, but I love this. Look, I don't know if he's going to make the team. This is someone who, if you looked at NBA big boards, was not really in the top 60, probably not in the top 80 or 90 guys. So he was a long shot to get drafted. More likely was going to be an undrafted guy. They took him at 58, I think largely because he's a local guy and cheap shooting's great. And look, you have the Laketown Squadron that are having their inaugural season over in Kenner at the Pontchartrain Center. Putting a local guy on that team to kind of make them be a draw. And look, you would imagine Jaron Pierre Jr. will. I think that's a smart move. And if the Pelicans just ever need some offense off the bench, you can bring him in. But this just makes sense. You know, we were kind of expecting that the Pelicans might sell the 58th overall pick for cash considerations, the infamous cash considerations. I wonder if that picture is still floating around somewhere. If you know, you know, kind of thing. And they didn't. They drafted someone. You know, they have really 1 or 2 roster spots open. That's about it. Really one at this point in time. So you would imagine they're going to use that on somebody in free agency, leaving Jaron Pierre Jr. as the outside looking in. So likely playing more with the squadron this year than he would be with the Pelicans. But if you sign him on a 2-way or to an Exhibit 10 where he stays in the G League, that's fine. You don't expect much for the 58th overall pick. You don't want to use the outliers of Nikola Jokic, Draymond Green, etc. to kind of prove the exceptions to proving the rule here. 58th overall pick doesn't often amount to much, but you know what? It takes the expectations off of him, I think, and it allows just a really cool feel-good story here. And there's something to be said for just doing things like that. So I kind of love this. And look, when you look at what he brings to the team, you know, it's not like he's a bad player or anything like that overall. He was one of the ACC's most productive scorers last year with SMU. And again, at 6'5", that's pretty good size. You want that. You know, I know tiny guards are kind of in vogue right now, but that's not how I view it, I think. I still want to have a lot of size. We're actually going to talk more about that later in the show here. And he's able to score from multiple levels. And I think that's what's pretty important with him here. It's just kind of that combo guard that he is, some cheap guard depth here. So this is someone, you know, when you look at what he's really good at is shooting 37% from 3-point attempts on volume too, which I think is a really important thing. He can pull up off the dribble. He can knock down catch and shoot opportunities. If you're a shooter, you got to make them in multiple ways. Pierre Jr. can definitely do that. You know, one of the things that watching some quick film on him after the draft, he is definitely the number one guy and not scared of the pressure and the moment. I love that. You want players to have confidence, to have been just comfortable taking shots in big time situations. We've seen when players get like the yips or something else and they lose that confidence and they're passing up open shots even though they should be taking them. I don't see that happening here. This does not scream to me to be a player that would go through any sort of crisis of confidence whatsoever. And look, this team needs more size all around on the team, and he brings you that. There are flaws to his game too. I think one of the big things here is he's not a playmaker. He's not like a lead guard. He's definitely more of a combo of a scoring guard, of someone who's just going to come in and be that spark plug off the bench and just give you some instant offense. He at times has moments of being just a black hole. The ball gets to his hands. It's not leaving his hands. He's either going to drive and attack or shoot, and it's going to be that. And your offense gets into isolation-heavy style basketball. That's not great. He's also not good defensively. He has the size and some of the tools to do it, but he doesn't have, elite athleticism to be exceptional on that side of the ball. When he's on the court, he's certainly going to get picked on. And does that fit in with what the Pelicans are trying to do? But he's the 58th overall pick for a reason. And we're not going to put too many expectations on him. Instead, this is just a really cool story to me. And we should take it for that. There's going to be plenty of people that want to go watch him play for the G League Laketown Squadron here, particularly in their first season. It's going to mean that place is packed. If he's going to help you draw some fans into attendance, if it's going to be a really cool story, he'll get into an NBA game, you would imagine. And that first time in the Smoothie King Center is going to be an incredible moment in what could be a rough season. Well, you know what? You look for those sort of bright spots when it comes to everything. So I like this pick. Really, truthfully, I did not expect much here. I thought they would just try and sell the pick or trade it, maybe try and get a future second round pick, but I don't really think you're going to get a future second for the 58th overall pick at that point in time. So the Pelicans kind of making the best of a rough pick. Look, and also for pick, this is the pick they got when they traded Jose Alvarado away to at least get, something that makes you feel kind of good about that. I think that's an important thing that we shouldn't forget about as well. Seeing Jose win a title was cool. Really happy for him. But you also miss the player you absolutely love on the team, right? You see it here in the background of my show. So to kind of replace the the warm and fuzzy feeling that Jose Alvarado provided, which is kind of weird to say given the type of player he is, to kind of replace that with an equally cool story in Jaron Pierre Jr., I'm all for that sort of thing. So good job by the Pelicans to use this. And look, maybe he doesn't end up making the team. Maybe he doesn't have much of a career and they're not going to sign him to an NBA contract. They don't even want him on a two-way. At least you kind of did right by Jaron Pierre Jr. because now he got to hear his name announced at the draft. He got to say he was drafted. And if you were just going to kind of waste that pick anyway, at least give someone do right by somebody, do good with that pick. And I think the Pelicans definitely accomplished that here. I believe he's going to have a press conference on Monday for all of this is what I was told. So we'll hear a little bit more from him, but it's going to be a really cool story. Really excited for him, for his friends, his family. Just what an overall great story on, a night that was kind of a two-night draft that was kind of disappointing for New Orleans in a sense of do something. Teams around him got significantly better, and they're just kind of stuck, it feels like. To at least come away with this is something that makes me pretty happy. So I like seeing Jaron Pierre Jr. get drafted, and let's hope there's a really good story here too where he ends up playing for the team and having a lot of success. So coming up next, the offseason, y'all, is just getting started, and we got some big-time rumors that broke immediately after the draft ended. Let's look at that and what it means for New Orleans, and it means more than you think for New Orleans. I'll tell you why, even if they're not trading for LaMelo Ball, but it impacts New Orleans. I'll tell you how coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos can show up fast, and that's where Indeed-sponsored jobs come in. Indeed-sponsored jobs help you reach candidates who actually fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, and location. So finding the right person can make all the difference, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. Look, all of these teams here are looking for the right person in the draft to unlock their franchise, to unlock their organization. I love some of the picks that we've seen. I definitely think Kim Boozer going to Memphis is like the perfect type of player that they should be looking for, right? You're not trying to look at just every option here. You're focused on identifying the players, the people that are going to match what you're looking for. That's what good organizations do here. So when you can spend more time evaluating great candidates and less time searching, everybody benefits. And that's exactly why that's exactly what Indeed Sponsored Jobs is designed to help businesses do. So spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of Locked On Pelicans will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support Locked On Pelicans by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Pelicans. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans also brought to you by Hims. ED is way more common than most guys think, and millions of men deal with it at some point in time. So Hims is a simple, convenient way to take care of your health by connecting you with a licensed healthcare provider online and giving you access to personalized treatment options from the comfort of home. No awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process designed to make getting care easier. So taking care of yourself shouldn't feel complicated, and Hims is making the process private and easy to navigate. It's healthcare built around your schedule and your comfort here. You know, when someone has something uncomfortable to talk about, the last thing you want to do is get a complicated process for it. Having the ability to start online from home makes taking that first step feel much more manageable. So get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more. Visit hims.com/lockedonnba. That's hims.com/lockedonnba for your free online visit. hims.com/lockedonnba. Prescription required. See website for details and important safety information. Sildenafil is a generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of Viatris Specialty LLC. Hims is not affiliated or endorsed with Viatris in any way. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below on YouTube here. And don't forget, you can also listen to us on the Gulf Coast, watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every weekday at 10:30 a.m. Same place you watch your Pelicans play. Get your Pelicans daily fix completely ad-free, by the way, by joining the Everydayer Club. Get your 7-day free trial right now and get closer to the Pels without the interruptions. Click the link in the show notes to learn more. Buckle up, y'all. The offseason is just getting started. It really is here. You know, the draft was quieter the first round didn't have a single veteran player traded, which is kind of crazy to me. The second round didn't really have much either. Now the offseason's about to kick into high gear. I know everyone was kind of expecting big things, and look, I thought they were on the verge of doing something. They were trying to do things during the draft. This team knows they need to do something. Now, I'm not sure they know exactly what that something is yet, but they know they need to do something here. And they're going to have the opportunity to do so. You know, right before the draft started, Shams Charania came in and said the Boston Celtics are actively engaged in trade talks around Jaylen Brown with multiple interested teams. And he said there's a real sense of purpose around moving Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics. By dangling him in those Giannis trade talks, they might have just poisoned that relationship, and now he wants out, feeling disrespected here. Could the Pelicans get into that? I have been saying for the past couple of weeks now, the everydayers have heard this. They know they need to do something. They know, I promise you, they know they cannot just run this back. Whether that is adding more win-now players or pivoting to a rebuild or a youth movement. They won't call it a rebuild. It'll be a youth movement. I think they're open to different things. You know, when you hear all of the deals they were potentially talking about with Trey Murphy, they were centered around picks, and they were in discussions around those sorts of things. They were trying to get the 8th pick from Atlanta. That screams that to me, that screams rebuild, youth, whatever word or phrase you want to use with that. Unless they are, again, just kind of delusional and don't realize where this roster is and that rookies aren't going to help you win. But the short part of this is they know they need to do something. And again, I think they're willing to let the market decide. Maybe it's just a Jaylen Brown becomes available, so let's make a run at Jaylen Brown. Maybe it would have been the draft. Maybe now I think the chances of a rebuild in the youth movement are much less. So maybe Jaylen Brown becomes an option for New Orleans. Maybe not. We'll see. But you also had news break right after that LaMelo Ball is being included in trade talks from the Charlotte Hornets and that the Minnesota Timberwolves are very linked to him right now. We know of the Ja Morant rumors. You look at teams like Detroit. They dumped Isaiah Stewart to the Memphis Grizzlies and dumped his contract because they're clearly lining up a move. You don't just trade a guy that had so much toughness and at times is a key guy for you in your culture and Isaiah Stewart for 3 second-round picks unless you got something else going on. Trajan Langdon's pretty smart. I believe that, right? You've also seen other teams that now maybe have a glut of big men. Does Isaiah Hartenstein leave OKC now that they drafted Adai Mara? Is Daniel Gafford on the moves from the Mavericks now that they drafted Morez Johnson Jr.? Those are potentially things the Pelicans could get involved in. If they're looking to really change their team, if they're really looking to just do something, right, and not run out a similar starting lineup next year, there are moves and there are ways for the Pelicans to get involved in various things. So the offseason is just getting started. The final roster needs to be set before this, a day or two before the season starts. There's no need to think they just are being irrational, right? The definition of insanity, same thing, expecting different results, which is what would feel like if they run the same roster back. But I don't believe that's what they're trying to do whatsoever. I think that's why they're kind of exploring all the different options here. Now, I also think it might be tough for them to actually completely change their roster and accomplish some of this right now. Look at Ja Morant being available and now LaMelo Ball. There's not very many teams that need point guards. The Memphis Grizzlies at this point almost seem resigned to including draft assets with Ja Morant to be able to move him. That's not going to make it easy to move someone like DeJounte Murray. In fact, this makes it harder. Teams are going to be more interested in LaMelo Ball and maybe even Ja Morant over him. Yeah, DeJounte Murray came back and had that really great game against Houston, and he was just decent the rest of the time. But his contract's pretty big. There is that recent injury that I think is going to scare teams off. And, even prior to that, in his first season in New Orleans, he didn't look particularly good. Now, he was dealing with so much that the fact that he was even playing basketball, I think, is a testament to who he is and how much he's capable of persevering. But you've got to remove that from this. I don't know if teams care about that. I don't think they're going to look at his bad play in New Orleans and be like, well, the dude was going through a lot. Maybe some are. This is just kind of the reality, the business side of the league at times, even if it feels very impersonal like that. But if LaMelo Ball is available, if Ja Morant's available, that's crowding the market for point guards. And it's going to mean an asset like DeJounte Murray might be considered a negative asset or close to zero at this point and not going to be easy to move. When you look at the players that they really would like to move, Jordan Poole, Jordan Hawkins, they have no value around the league. I was on WWL radio like 30 minutes before the first round of the draft started, and they said, is there much value around the league for Jordan Poole for making a trade? And I was like, you want the short answer? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. I was like, no. And then there was like a little bit of awkward silence on the radio. I was kind of making a joke, but it's just, there isn't value for Jordan Poole around the league. You're going to need to make that a bigger thing and probably include future draft assets. When you look at what this team is trying to do, if they are not trading away a Trey Murphy or a Herb Jones, they don't have a ton of assets that teams are interested in. And that's just the reality of the situation here, unless they're using future draft assets. And that to me doesn't seem like the smartest thing that they should be doing. When you look at, other teams around them right now, they got better. Right? A lot of the teams here got significantly better. Utah is going for it. Oklahoma City added more size. The Spurs added more size. The Grizzlies added more size and a ton more toughness. It's rough out there. And so are these moves for an Isaiah Hartenstein or somebody else, right, going to really move the needle that much? Yeah, you might have a different roster, but now you've got more long-term money on it, and you're still in the same kind of position that you were in, with Zion Williamson and a Derik Queen that don't look like they fit together despite what Joe Dumars says. And they'll give it a shot, it sounds like, but eventually you're going to have to make a decision here if you want your fortunes to be dramatically different. And so to me, I want to get into next why this matters here. And I want to go back to Charlotte potentially moving LaMelo Ball and their mindset behind it, because that's a mindset, and this will probably be its own show soon, that I think the Pelicans need to embrace. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by Game Time. There are more live events than ever we're seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. So that's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive saving opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the hassle here. Honestly, whenever I'm going to a new venue, I want to know what my view is going to be before I spend potentially a lot of money on tickets. Game Time's going to help you know those things ahead of time. You can buy tickets with a lot more confidence. They have a seat view feature, so you know what your view is going to be before you buy. That's what I think is awesome about Game Time and why it's my go-to ticketing app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans, almost 13,000. Let's get that number by the end of the offseason. Almost 13,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, it's Ross Jackson and Locked On Saints, also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Charlotte trading away LaMelo Ball. Look, it makes sense to me. Makes a lot of sense to me here. And when you look at this team, I think it's interesting, right? Say the Pelicans are on the outside looking in this offseason because, well, they don't have many options to upgrade the team, as we just talked about. What do? Do you run it back? Do you make another bad type of trade just to do something? This whole path forward becomes a whole lot easier if you're focused on the young players. So back to Charlotte here. Brian Windhorst said on set, quote, they're pivoting. The Hornets are looking at an opportunity to pivot. They had been about LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges. They want their future to be about Con Knipple and Brandon Miller, end quote. Yeah, that makes sense. They were a surprise team. Brandon Miller was in his third year, really helping them. Knipple too. He's an outlier from some of that stuff, but he was exceptional last year. But again, the exception does not prove the rule. They're making a decision and picking a direction. The Pelicans need to do something too. When you think about their future, is it Derik Queen and Jeremiah Fears? Is it Zion Williamson? Right? That's what they need to try and do. You drafted these players. If you were to make a trade for John Moran, it's even less about that he doesn't fit at all this team, but he blocks minutes for Jeremiah Fears. Fears doesn't start. What the Pelicans need to do is they need to build a runway for both Jeremiah Fears and Derik Queen to be able to take off. Really as simple as that. They need to do whatever they can and everything they can to let both these players flourish and become the best version of NBA players they can absolutely be. Burying them on the bench isn't going to do that. These guys, want to start. That's very much a thing that all NBA players care about. They want to start. Whether it's like, well, they should care about closing out. You can say that. They don't. They want to start, Right now, is Jaron Pierre starting on this team? The answer to me would be no. He needs to be starting. Does Derik Queen start? Do you start him and Zion because that didn't go well? Or do you need to pair Queen with another center if you want him to be successful? Because frankly, he's probably more of a 4 than a 5. You need to do what you can to make the long-term futures for Fears and Queen, who you have invested a lot in, very good, right? Otherwise, the players will start to grumble. Utah's going to run into that in a couple of years. They have 6 starters for 5 spots. Guys want to start. You can bring Ace Bailey off the bench for a year or so, but he's going to need to be in the starting lineup eventually, or you're going to have to move him. It impacts their long-term earning potential. That's what these guys tend to think about more than anything else. To me, this offseason needs to be less about upgrading the center spot or adding more defense or adding more shooting. No, this offseason needs to be about figuring a path forward. Trading in the first draft, drafting Nate Ament or somebody else, definitely would have been a path forward of we're focusing on youth. And we'll make sure we're going to put these players in to succeed. It's not, we'll draft these young guys, have them, but hey, let's put veterans ahead of them. That's the 2-timeline plan. The Golden State Warriors have done that, and it doesn't work. They didn't develop any of those young guys because of it. Simple as that. They could have potentially. This team needs to figure out the path forward. If it's not Fears and Queen, try and move them for players that can help you now. That's kind of what you need to do if you want to maximize it, because Memphis got better. OKC got better. The Spurs got better. The Pelicans haven't done anything. They have time to do it. They have time to change this roster. That's what the rest of the offseason is for, so I'm not upset that they haven't. But yeah, they know they need to do some things. It's time to go out and execute it over the next couple of weeks and months. We'll see what they do. I'm very curious because there are moments when it really very much feels like they're stuck, even with a new head coach in Jamal Mosley, who I think is going to do a great job here. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. A lot of draft coverage the past couple of days, a lot of trade rumors the past couple of days. We'll start to breathe a little bit in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans as we start to kind of look towards the offseason. Probably do a quick free agency guide for y'all coming up, and any other news if it breaks. See y'all next time.